All right, so thanks everyone. I always appreciate just scrolling through people's gratitudes and plans for these hot summer days. It's really nice to just connect at that level. Well, welcome to July 21st. It's still July, it's still hot summer. Just transition subcommittee meeting. It's great to gather this evening. We have the opportunity to accept the minutes from our June 16th meeting and then review the agenda. I wanted to also note that we're going to talk about some of the changes and things that are evolving around the Climate Council and this subcommittee. And one of those items is that Amanda Carlson from Capstone is being pulled back to Capstone to do other things, and Sue can talk more about that. But Amanda will, I think, only intermittently be able to join our meetings and is not able to be our official note taker any longer. And so one of the things that we were hoping could happen is that we could do rotating note taking at future meetings. Carrie has agreed to note take for this meeting, so thank you, Carrie. We appreciate that. And then as we talk about kind of going forward, if we could do it a little more meeting to meeting and people volunteer or make the effort to sign up to volunteer in advance to note take for an upcoming meeting. And I'd add, Sue and I have also talked about doing some rotating meeting facilitation as well. So would be very open and happy to have other members of the subcommittee express interest in facilitating future meetings. All right, so in the email that I sent and the agenda that's in the chat is the agenda, but also the link to the meeting minutes from June. Any discussion or comments on those minutes, or we feel comfortable accepting them?
I'd accept them.
Great. I think we often say if there's no comments, then that feels like acceptance for us. All right, so now let's review the agenda for today. So we wanted to dedicate a good amount of time to some Climate Council updates and review sort of some of the work plan conversations we've had, some of the priority areas and focus areas that we've talked about in the past, and then dedicate some time to just building space into what's changing and what's changed as a result of where we are in the Climate Council and the acceptance of the plan and where we are as subcommittees and what we have for capacity and leadership and membership. So I think there's a little bit of a conversation there where there'll be some updates and people can share. We'll do public comment. And then Indra has expressed and been willing to lead us in a reflection on our work exercise that Indra can explain when we get to that portion of the agenda, and that's how we'll sort of wrap up the evening. Any questions or thoughts about the agenda? Anything else that anyone would want to add? Okay, great. Just gonna try to see if I can move things around here on my screen. All right, so for Climate Council updates, I think there were two particular subjects that we wanted to talk about that pertained to kind of a follow-up on the transportation law that we talked about in our last meeting, and then also hoping for Claire to take a few moments and visit with us, share with us about the work that's happening within the Department of Public Service. One thing that I just wanted to offer, and Sue and others kind of please pipe in, the Climate Council updates item on our agenda, I have to admit that it wasn't until our last sort of agenda setting meeting that this really started to like sink in for me about what this update portion of our agenda was about. Because I can sometimes be of the mind that we don't need meetings to have updates, because updates can be provided in written format, or we can read information in other places. My understanding, and again, please others correct me if you feel differently, but the intent around this Climate Council update on our agendas each time is to acknowledge that there's very specific focus and charge of the Just Transition Subcommittee that's ensuring that public engagement is held statewide and focuses on frontline and impacted communities, and that we were, as a subcommittee, are sort of written into a larger purpose and vision of the ongoing implementation of the Climate Council and the Climate Action Plan's work. And that the updates from the different task groups or the Climate Council is really about an opportunity for us to ensure and understand where there's just transitions occurring, or maybe less than just transitions that we're feeling a little that there's more work to be done, or that there's more focus necessary. So again, to me, that was a somewhat clarifying function for these updates, that we're really kind of hearkening back to what our responsibility and charge is as a subcommittee. Sue or Marion or anyone else want to add anything to that, or correct anything that I may have said that you don't feel so strongly about?
Can you hear me? This is Sue.
Yeah.
I think that for sure today's presentations are very much in the vein of how are we feeling about the work being done to expand the public engagement to address some of the issues that we've raised over these many months. For sure today is about that. I don't know how others feel about updates generally, and whether they need to only be made if they're relevant to that. But for sure, I think we do have an ongoing responsibility to be thinking about that. So I think that's happening today. And we want the presentations. I think the presenters today really want to hear from this group about their efforts.
Thanks, Sue. Chris.
Just an observation from the last steering committee and council meeting. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not a letter should be sent asking for the clean heat standard to be, work to continue while the session's out, even though the clean heat standard bill was vetoed. And one of the things that it raised for me was, and this is based on comments, but during meetings and then also after that, or before, just conversations I've had in general, we probably need to suggest to the council as a whole that we need to make space to talk about things that relate to the council but happen beyond the council, like the clean heat standard, because I think there are a lot of folk who wanted to talk about how that legislative process went, what was in the bill, its merits and its shortcomings, but we've not had a chance to do that. We've not created space for that. And so the discussion around the letter really, I think, was people wanted to have a much larger discussion. And so I think we need to figure out how to do that. Not only that, but, on anything else, any other policy that goes to and through the legislature and comes out. The same thing with the auto and truck standard, the rulemaking process. I think, yes, there was a policy that was included in the climate action plan, but we never, after the legislative session, we never really talked about what does all that really mean. So anyway, just in the interest of kind of just transitions and really like how do we engage not only with council members and subcommittee members, with the general public. And I know we're going to talk about this some today, but I think those are a couple of pressure points that I've seen. Again, I could be totally wrong. Maybe it's not necessary, but it seemed like folk wanted to talk about that, you know, kind of beyond just the recommendation of a subcommittee that came to the steering committee. So anyway, I'll hush up.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I think let's make sure we return to the discussion around clean heat standard and whether there's a recommendation that this subcommittee wants to put forth. I think Chase is also going to give an update from the biomass task group when we get to that point. But let's start with the transportation public events. And I know that Rachel and Megan, or just Rachel, is here.
Megan had a child care kind of last minute thing that came up, so I'm just going to cover. I'll start whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Rachel,
okay,
take
great.
it.
Well, I apologize in advance because it is really slow. It's as hot in my current kitchen as it is outside, so I may be a little slow in formulating my responses or ideas today, so just beg your forgiveness. So yeah, the context is exactly what Sue had mentioned, that under the Global Warming Solutions Act, the agency is required to implement rules consistent with the Climate Action Plan, which directed the agency to implement several zero and low emission vehicle rules by the end of this year. And so the agency has been, I think I can't remember if it was last month or the month before, kind of presented an overview of the kind of proposed timeline for public engagement and mentioned hang on.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was just me because of my fan, but yeah, Rachel, it is a little hard to hear you.
Hear me now? Let's see. Is that?
Yeah, I think that will be better.
Okay, it may have been my headphones.
Thank you.
So this is related to the rulemakings that ANR is required to implement pursuant to the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Climate Action Plan. These are there's a suite of rules called Advanced Clean Cars 2, Advanced Clean Trucks, the Low NOx Heavy Duty Omnibus Rule, and the Phase 2 Greenhouse Gas Rule as it relates to truck trailers. So this was all mentioned in the Climate Action Plan as it related to the transportation sector. I was just saying I couldn't remember if we had initially, I think we presented the rulemaking proposed rule to the Climate Council, I think it was May 16th, Marianne can correct me, and then we proceeded to meet with the this committee and the Transportation Task Group to get feedback on the public engagement process for those rules. So that's why I'm here today, is to follow up on that communication. As I mentioned in the last time I presented to this committee, you know, we have our typical process under the Administrative Procedure Act for public notice and comment and public meetings. But the Global Warming Solutions Act directs the agency to do much more extensive engagement in communities that are disadvantaged, low income, rural, across the state. So we're planning a pretty robust public engagement process and would love input on that process. Now I'm going to share my screen. And I'll just flag that we have locations and venues set in the communities that we talked about in the last meeting that were identified, and I can reshare that memo, which describes how we concluded which communities to host these meetings in. So I'll find that and can share that link in the chat. So we have some proposed venues. Some of them are not 100% confirmed, so but I'll just put it on the screen so you can see it. And then what I'd love to walk through today is kind of get some feedback about how to shape the agenda for those events to make sure that we're having the right conversations with communities and members of the public that are attending these events. So let me just share my screen here. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay, I can't tell how big it is. Is this viewable? Should I make it bigger? Are you able to put this in the chat just so folks can also maybe just pull it up on their computer? Okay, so we've identified 6 public events that we'd like to have related to making. As you can see on the screen, we've identified these dates in September as kind of our rough schedule. We got some feedback that even though we could have meetings in August, that might be difficult because school isn't in session and camps and summer vacations. So we got feedback that September would actually be a better kind of time period to have these meetings, which is why we've chosen kind of that time period. And as you can see, we're having, the meetings across the state at various locations, and these will be in-person meetings between 6 and 8 p.m. And we're hoping to provide food and to have tabling available with information related to electric vehicles, existing programs that are happening across the state that kind of complement and relate to the rules, which are all about, increasing the number of electric vehicles that are available for sale in Vermont. So I'll just walk through the goals, and feel free to tell me to slow down or stop me to ask questions. But I've identified kind of, or I say either us, our group, Megan and the rest of the staff at A&R, have identified a couple high-level goals. The first is obviously to review the rules themselves, but also really describe the transition that we're talking about to electric vehicles and the benefits of that, the benefits and the impacts that could have on Vermonters. We also want to provide specific information about existing programs that can support Vermonters that want to access electric vehicles or to benefit from the transition. So we're planning to have information from various stakeholders and agencies about incentives, replace by ride programs, charging stations, and kind of the suite of policies that would kind of complement the rules that we're proposing. And then we want to have a focused discussion with the communities about what people need in order to benefit from the rules and the transition to electric vehicles. This is something I think we got some feedback that, what we're trying to avoid is maybe a more formal setting where, we just have a microphone and everybody gets 3 minutes and you can submit a public comment. I think we're hoping to really engage in the discussion and to get feedback about this transition and what it means and what the impacts are. So that's kind of the high level goals, and I'll just kind of move through a proposed agenda that might work towards that. But if there's a significant goal missing in this, welcome any feedback on that too.
Rachel, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in for one quick second, just to complement what you said. And for folks who don't know me, my name is David Plum, and I'm just helping to facilitate the work of the Climate Council. When I was speaking with Rachel and others about this, one of the most important things influencing the way these goals are expressed now was feedback that you all provided in the last time you spoke about this, which was there's no real point in going out and doing this engagement if you're just going out to inform people about something that's going to happen in a rule that needs to be adopted because it's a California rule and Vermont can't change it, right? It's like, great, we're taking it on, here we go. That's not great engagement. And so these goals are really trying to say, what's the conversation to have with diverse communities in Vermont about this, right? What actually should you be talking about? And that's where that third goal really comes in. It's so important is here comes a rule, right? We think the rule's positive for a variety of reasons. What's it gonna look like in your community if this gonna be positive for you, right? And we know the issue of EVs is a lightning issue, right? An issue that's concerning. And so let's have a conversation about that and what that can look like. So that I just wanted to pause on that because I think it's really important that there was some feedback that you all provided. And I'm hearing Rachel and others take that on and say, yep, we actually need to have a good conversation about something. And this is what we think would be a great conversation.
Thank you, David. That's why you're such an excellent facilitator. Making me sound much better and more articulate. So yeah, appreciate that feedback. This is, yeah, again, certainly, I think a lot of the discussion that we had, I can't remember if it was a month or two ago, was that we don't want to have a conversation where people feel like they're not able to influence the process or not have a say in kind of what's going on. So this is, our attempt to have kind of a broader conversation about this transition and what it could mean. Carrie. Abby, is it okay if I call on people? I don't want to.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thanks. Okay. I wonder under the goals, like I've talked to a few people in my community who have gotten wind of this rule, and I think there's questions about who made the decision to adopt it and maybe that's the Climate Council, but like I've heard people say like, oh, the governor said we need to adopt this rule. So I think it's just maybe should be clear of like who made this decision, because there's a lot of misinformation on that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. This is a rule, you know, an action that's being taken by the Secretary of A&R, but is required by the Climate Action Plan and was discussed by the Climate Council. So, but I think providing, to take your point further, I think providing that context in the setting of outreach, I think will be important. I will also just share, I think some of the feedback I got or that I heard from the last meeting was that wasn't necessarily a satisfactory answer, that like we're doing this, you know, because the Climate Council told us to. I mean, the real benefits of the rule are that we're reducing you know, air pollution and the impacts of climate change. And that one of the things that we really want to highlight with the rule is the way that this is going to benefit Vermonters in terms of, you know, air quality and climate, but also being able to access, you know, cleaner vehicles. Other feedback about the goals, I'll just kind of move through the run of show, or at least what we have at the start. Okay, so what I have here is kind of just a rough agenda to try to think through how we might spend our 2 hours together in September in these public events. And then kind of an outline that expands on some of these topics that we have on the agenda. So just at a high level, obviously welcome introductions. It'll be the agency natural resources, myself and the other staff kind of presenting the rule. We'll talk about the purpose and goals of the meeting, kind of roadmap. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a non-traditional event, so we just want to make sure we kind of walk through what to expect. I think the one portion of it is going to be the overview of the rules, the benefits, and the impacts. I have on here, you know, roughly 10 minutes, mostly because some of the feedback that we got at the Transportation Task Group meeting and also the other Just Transition committee meeting from a couple months ago was that the rules themselves, you know, they're pretty technical, but also because we have to adopt California standards, there's not much flexibility in terms of the specific, you know, stringency and other kind of mechanics of the rule. So we want to provide information about the benefits of the rule, the potential impacts, and kind of acknowledge, you know, some of the inequities around electric vehicles, and then move into a conversation about how to address that and what we can do. You know, what are some of the complementary policies that can complement this rule. So a brief overview of the rules, benefits, and impacts. Then a discussion of existing resources to access electric vehicles and charging. There's a lot actually happening at the state across different agencies and in other sectors, and we want to just kind of give a brief overview of that and also direct folks. I think one of the main potential benefits of having these kinds of gatherings is to actually have resources available, people that can answer questions about how to get incentives, you know, what the rules will do, and you know, where to find charging stations, what are the plans for increased charging in the state. So to really provide a lot of space in the meeting for people to get that information, ask questions, and understand, you know, how to benefit from this transition. So that's kind of information that the agency would share, and then we want to move into discussion. I mean, I think as I mentioned, this is kind of maybe more traditionally where we'd have a public comment period, and obviously we want to receive public comment, but I think we definitely want to make sure there's room for discussion about, you know, what this transition means and will look like in the state. And then we'll have some kind of report and debrief. So I'll kind of scroll down so you can see more of the details. And I'd welcome feedback. I guess maybe we can start with each maybe section, and then we'd love to hear reactions about how this might, you know, flow as a meeting. Is this, I think the main thing I have here at the bottom in terms of feedback that I'm really interested in is, you know, are we having the right conversations to address what's needed in frontline communities to benefit from a rule that's going to, you know, make electric vehicles cheaper and more accessible, but, you know, recognizing that we need to hear from community members about what's needed to benefit from that transition. And then also, after we kind of talk through the agenda, to think through, you know, what outreach should we be doing and should we be considering as we move towards these meetings. So I'll kind of pause there until I've been talking. I don't know, David, if you want to add anything since you were before.
No. Your audio, for some reason, Rachel, is a little bit hard to hear. Just occasionally, I'm not sure what that's all about. But I will say what's interesting about looking at this agenda is it's what I see as an interesting mix of some introductory sort of explanation. This is what this thing is. This is what it's all about. This is what its impacts are expected to be. And then some introductory piece about, we know this is challenging, particularly for low-income Vermonters who are looking at this and wondering, how am I part of this story? Here are some existing things that are available. And then you actually pause and do a more interactive piece around, these are existing tools and programs about helping Vermonters get access to cleaner vehicles. And then you come back and have the conversation and say, all right, well, that's great. But if we're really thinking about this for 2035, what's going to make a big difference? Right. And then you have an interesting conversation about the future of how all Vermonters can feel like this thing is a benefit and not a burden. So I like that flow of the agenda. I think that's interesting. So I'll just note that as an interesting way to hold a meeting and make it more feel like information discussion as opposed to hearing style. Chris, I see your hands up.
Please through my mic. I'm realizing that I'm still having issues, so I'll try to speak loudly. Chris?
Yeah. One other thing we talked about at the Transportation Task Group was noting all of this. This would just be a brief note during the meeting, but just to understand the fuller context, noting all the states that are signed on to this. And again, like Sue mentioned in the comments, a number have signed on to the California standards for decades. But just to understand how many millions of people, including the fourth largest economy in the world, California, is going to be affected by this. But it's also important to note that the EU has decided they're basically going to adopt not the California standard, but their same standard. And of course, they're a major auto manufacturer and designer with plants here in the United States. So another reason really to talk about this is, even if Vermont decided it doesn't want to participate, this is coming. And so we need to prepare for it. So because the market, everything is going to be evolving in this way. So we really need to, it's not so much a debate over, do we like it or not? It is, how do we make this work for everybody in a just way?
Thanks, Chris. I just want to acknowledge a couple comments in the chat. Sarah, I think that's a good comment you had about, we don't want to wait too long for discussion as part of an engagement meeting. And, you know, that was actually my intent in limiting the overview section, but I'm hearing you, if you're thinking the break for tabling is actually going to hinder discussion. I think our initial thought was that by having an opportunity for folks to actually review resources, that could be kind of an open space for folks, some folks to visit tables or folks to have small group discussions and then maybe have more formal prompts. But if you have suggestions about maybe a better way to either, you know, reorganize or to make the best use of that time, I think the intent is to have a discussion and engagement while also providing resources and information, because for some people, I think we wanted to recognize that for some people, you know, they may be starting with, you know, what are these vehicles, what's currently available, and some people might have, you know, there may just be different levels of interest and understanding about resources, and so we just wanted to provide some opportunity for folks to kind of ask questions, but welcome feedback on if we should just roll right into small group discussion and then maybe do tabling at the end, or any other feedback about, I think this is all can be shaped and changed, so welcome specifics.
I mean, I'll just expand on that a little bit if it's okay, which is to say that, and I apologize, I missed the very beginning of your presentation. I had another commitment. But I think, you know, if the meeting is advertised as like, learn about the rule and learn about resources, then great. If it's advertised as like, we want to engage with you in this conversation, then I feel like it's helpful to get to the conversation faster, and that it can feel paternalistic to just be like, here's what it is, and here's all the things that we're already doing, as opposed to just get to the meat of the conversation. So I wonder, and this would just be a small tweak, because I appreciate what you're saying, Rachel, but I might as a facilitator think about it as like a purpose and goals overview of the rule as quickly as you can, but that's the meat of it, right? And then, have your presenters give like the elevator version of what they do and say, we'll be here until blah, blah, blah after the meeting. And we'd love to tell you more about what we're doing, but not spend a bulk of time having people digging into what they're doing. But just because you want people to know that there's resources out there. But if that's not the primary point of the meeting, then I think I'd just go into the discussion.
Yeah, so maybe
that's my take on it.
Helpful, and I think that's the main reason why we're here, is to rely on this feedback and expertise in these types of meetings. So I do think maybe what I'm hearing is, instead of kind of that bullet about breaking for attendees to kind of visit tables, maybe that overview of existing resources, kind of like a round robin for shouting out everyone who's here and what they have brought in terms of information. And then just making it open, for folks to, I think, we had talked about opening early for tabling. So as people are mingling and, maybe getting food, they could be checking out tables, but maybe doing a more formal, just kind of shout out for who's there, and then moving into discussion. Or, it will be a 2-hour meeting. So maybe it could be like, maybe just a bio break or something. And then we could just reconvene for the discussion portion at the hour, or we could just jump right into it. Certainly don't want to exhaust people or just talk at people. But welcome feedback about it. I'll make all these edits today, so welcome specifics.
I'd be interested to hear if anybody has reactions to, is this the right conversation to be having, particularly with the communities that are being targeted in these meetings? Are they getting at the right conversation? I think that's really interesting. If there's any feedback on that, be well received.
That might be one detail. Rachel, did you share, and I was looking at Indra's question in the chat about what are the locations again? Maybe that's back at the top of your page, which includes the dates and the times. Did that also include
the chat? These are kind of the dates and locations.
Yeah,
and thank you. Let me just make sure I'm seeing the chat. I think I'm seeing maybe a shorter meeting with breaking 45 minutes early. That may actually make more sense to do. Kind of the break is just, we'll stay here and have the venues available for like the last 45 minutes, and then folks can, because I also imagine that people might want to come up to the table. And some people might want to just come to the table, learn more about the rule. Some people might want to, go talk to V-Trans, and some people might want to go, might want to go see the EVs, if there's any at the event. So I take that point. Let me make sure I didn't miss any other comments here.
So Rachel, I'm again having a hard time catching everything that you're saying. So just a reminder, I guess, that it's hard today for some reason. I'm not sure why.
I'm not sure if I can change that. Does anyone who put a comment want to maybe share the comment aloud? Indra, do you want to share?
See, Indra has a hand raised.
Great.
Yeah, I might have missed this, but like in terms of determining where the locations are, there were a couple of factors about, the last meetings, the public engagement meetings where they were hosted, they were not accessible to public transportation. And there was not a lot of thought put into providing, I don't know, car share, whatever options are available. And for a lot of people, they are, these are not the places that are accessible. 1, 2, whenever we are thinking about the date and the time, who is it targeting, right? For a lot of people, some of the time might work for the professional job, holders, but are we really targeting this to people who are working other jobs? And instead of just having only one time, 6 to 8 p.m., are we thinking about morning time we can, like that kind of stuff, were those factors considered? That's the first thing. And second is in terms of like advertising, how are we advertising these events? Because oftentimes what I've seen is like we have sent the, email to the organizations and, that will be it. That's what I've heard in the past. I'm not assuming that will be the case, but I would love to learn more about like, how are we advertising? And in terms of the discussions, and I am biased in some way based on the experience that I had in the past, if we make it be so much about policy and procedure, a lot of people are going to get lost, because for us, it might be easier for us to talk about policy and practices, because some of us are policy wonk and we have done the work around it. But for a lot of people, it won't be very accessible topic and they won't really participate. But I'm glad that we are talking about the benefit and whatnot, because based on our experience, Casca can speak, well, she can, because he said she can today. A lot of people were more inclined to talk when we were sharing the benefit that existed, because that would benefit them. So, I like the fact that we are focusing on that, but like, I think it is important to think about that accessibility, because in the past, when I attended public engagement forum, I saw a lot of people who have stake in the policy attending that, representing some of the organizations, representing some of the cause, rather than regular people who may not give a damn about it because it's not their top priority right now.
I really appreciate that feedback, and I think I would maybe ask that that you not hold us to past practice. I think we are trying to do something maybe different and push the boundaries of what we have done in the past. So I would just welcome any of that feedback and just signal back that I think we want to shape the process to meet the needs of the people that will be impacted, or to make sure that everyone can benefit. And so in terms of the time, I'll just share it. I think we heard some feedback that a variety of meeting times would be useful. So I should mention the Berry meeting is actually, since I sent this list to the committee, the Berry meeting is going to be at the library, I think at 4:30 was what we heard, to have an earlier option when there'll be a place for kids. The virtual meeting would be in the middle of the day, and then the other ones would be in the 6 to 8 hour, and that one of the benefits would be that we would have food around the dinner time as a way to incentivize and encourage people to attend. But if you think more variety would be useful in terms of the meeting times, we can certainly try to adjust. Well, we have some flexibility here in terms of designing this, as long as we can get the logistics worked out. But welcome that feedback, so appreciate it. And in terms
sorry, go ahead.
In terms of the second, I hope you, I'm sorry if you can't hear me. In terms of the second piece about outreach, that's something I think we really would like some input on. So what will happen is that there will be a formal public notice that the Secretary of State publishes in all the newspapers in the state. It happens automatically as part of the formal rulemaking process. But we will obviously be putting this information on the website, and we'll want to be doing more outreach than just the formal legal notice. But that's, that will happen automatically once we actually formally file the rule. It will be in all the newspapers, and we'll have it on our website, but we'll certainly be interested in doing more than that. So yeah, welcome feedback on that as well. And that may be a good subject of, maybe the next, Marian, maybe I can come to the next meeting with some thoughts about outreach engagement, how we might do that, but welcome feedback there.
Rachel, I'm seeing that there's some additional questions that I think subcommittee members are suggesting could be discussed with the various audiences, as well as an inquiry whether there's an opportunity to provide feedback outside of the meetings.
Yes, meaning outside of this meeting or the public meetings?
Anna, it was your comment, but I think you meant outside of this meeting.
Yeah, I'm just processing the agenda and the question that David posed and the conversation, and I'm not always my best immediately at the moment, so I just wanted to make sure I knew the right avenue for providing feedback as I think about it for 24 hours, if you will.
No, I'm not at my best either at this sweltering heat, but I'll put my email in the chat, and then you can email me directly. This is not set in stone. The only timeline that we're considering is that we'll need to, at least one or two of the hearings will need to be set probably by August 9th. So in terms of the location and the venue, that would have a kind of a hard stop once we officially file the rules. So we would need to have those pinned down. And I have booked many of the venues already, but could be flexible about times if that was the feedback. But otherwise, shaping the agenda, I think I welcome feedback. It doesn't have to be even tomorrow. Take the time you need to weigh in on this.
Wait, Rachel, sorry, this is Carrie. Just for the notes, how long are you taking feedback on this? When would you like comments?
Maybe by August 8th would be helpful, but it's not a hard stop.
So, Rachel, I think there's some, again, great questions and suggestions around outreach in the chat. If there's not any other hands raised, I'd like to consider moving to Claire to talk about the RFI from the Department of Public Service. I don't want to cut off conversation if there's other comments that people want to make right now.
Is there a way I can get the chat since I wasn't able to see it in real time? Marion, maybe?
Yep, I was just going to message you. I will send it to you, but you can also download it on your own.
I agree.
You click the 3 buttons and click download.
Your time. I know you have a lot to cover, so appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I think we appreciate considering the just transition recommendations and a different process coming from A&R. So I think this is a group that will always have suggestions and reactions and ideas, but it's great to see progress being made and moving in a direction that feels like it'll reach people and be more approachable. So thank you very much, and for bringing it to this group. Okay, Claire, are you feeling like you've got a few moments that you could share with us about the work that's happening at the Department of Public Service?
Yeah, happy to. Although, Sebi, did you have a question before we switch gears?
Yeah, I didn't want to take us down another rabbit hole, and so maybe briefly, I just heard that there was a delay in the rulemaking hearing in front of ICAR, and I was curious if we're like on track. Is there any concern about us not hitting deadlines?
I do not think that this public meeting schedule will be delayed. My understanding still as of this moment is that our rule will be on the August 8th ICAR meeting. So I'll put the opportunity to track that agenda. So you can just keep hitting refresh until it's on the agenda. The ICAR did hear the rules on July 11th, but they postponed a decision on the rules until the 8th. And I'll just mention there is an opportunity for public comment at an ICAR meeting, which ICAR, I'm sorry, is the acronym for Interagency on Administrative Rules, which is the first step in filing the rule. So just wanted to mention that. So yeah, I think we're still on track if we can be on the August 8th meeting schedule, but I will certainly let someone on this committee know if I get different information.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me, and the storm just moved through where I am. So hopefully I'll have stable internet for the next 5 to 10 minutes. But if I break up, that's why. We just got a nice downpour. But yeah, so as a notes on the agenda, I just wanted to take maybe 5 minutes, or if there's questions, a little more, to mention an effort that is ongoing at the Department of Public Service that we would love to hear feedback from folks in the subcommittee and folks in your network as well, related to our renewable electricity programs and policies in Vermont. In terms of just context, so for folks, just in case there's a lot in the CAP and the Comprehensive Energy Plan, but one of the recommendations in the Climate Action Plan was that Vermont reconsider its renewable energy standard to move from 75% a requirement to reach 75% renewable electricity in 2032, up to 100% renewable energy standard. And also in the Department of Public Service Comprehensive Energy Plan, or the State Comprehensive Energy Plan, we had a recommendation that the state reconsider this policy as well, and also the suite of renewable electricity programs that support it in terms of thinking about how we increase renewable electricity in Vermont. So earlier this month in July, the department opened a process to begin this review. We issued a request for information, which I actually don't think was linked in the agenda, but Jane sent it out to the Climate Council, and I can link it in the chat today and resend it to the subcommittee. But this request for information sort of kickstarted the process to look at this policy, the renewable energy standard, and supporting programs, and ask for public comment and thoughts on a couple of different issues related to the process itself. Oh, thanks, Abby. Appreciate that. So there's 3 core topics that we're hoping to start off the process with. One is actually asking for thoughts and input on what this process itself should look like, what the timeline should be, and the types of public engagement efforts that folks would be interested in seeing the department put together to learn from Vermonters, in addition to sort of the technical analyses that we expect this process would consider. The second core topic that this request for input touches on, and the type of decision-making criteria that we should be considering as we look at our programs and policies that support the adoption of renewable electricity. And then the final topic that's included in this document is some initial questions, sorry, just don't want to misspeak, that the department should consider right from the start, sort of what we're doing well as a state when it comes to thinking about renewable electricity, and where there may be some challenges that we're already aware of that may need to be addressed moving forward. And then there's also sort of, we're open to receiving any other thoughts, comments that we didn't specifically put in this document itself. And we're hoping to receive feedback by August 5th, although the timeline is flexible. We know the summer is a challenging time for folks. So I guess at a high level, that's sort of what the department has started the process of doing. We highlight in the request for information and some of the supporting documents that we've started conversations with folks like the Public Engagement Task Group and the Climate Council, because there's obviously a lot of coordination that could be done, not to duplicate efforts in terms of trying to reach out and learn from ongoing efforts. So I guess in terms of overview, I'll pause there. We have heard feedback already that it is still a pretty technical document. So I just, in the sense of time, wanted to say that I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations with anyone. If you have questions or feedback, we're open to different types of feedback, certainly written feedback, or if a conversation is easier. And we're just hoping that you'll consider, looking at the request for information yourself and maybe submitting some comments or circulating it to your networks as well. So I'll pause there. And if folks have any clarifying questions or initial comments, I'm happy to touch base on those, but I also know that we're tight for time tonight. So happy to talk about it at another meeting and follow up via email as well.
Thank you, Claire. Any initial kind of questions? Sorry that I didn't send out the RFI as part of the agenda materials. So people are just seeing it probably for the first time now, but it has the 3 topic areas for feedback, for input that Claire mentioned that the department's looking for. And Sarah has a question. Are you looking for us to do anything? I think the question was, does anyone in this group have comment that or input that they want to provide, or are you willing to share this RFI opportunity with your networks? I think were the two requests.
Yeah, I think at a high level, we, again, I know Jane sent it out to the Climate Council, but wanted to, reference it now because I know not every email gets read and get lots of emails, to reach out and offer to be a resource to talk about it if you have questions. And then, if you'd consider either responding to your organization and also spreading it through your networks. And Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the RFI is just you all looking for someone to actually do the work. That's what you're looking for. No, say what the RFI is for again specifically, having not had a chance to review it. Thank you.
Yep. So the request for information is sort of us opening this process, saying that we're going to start as the department looking at, our renewable energy standard as a policy and supporting programs, and requesting feedback from Vermont stakeholders and communities on what that process should look like itself, what the timeline should be. We'd heard some folks interested in a process that could provide recommendations for the next legislative session versus one that was longer and maybe could provide input for 2 legislative sessions from now. What types of engagement would be most useful for folks to engage in the process as it occurs, and then if there's folks that should be involved, so that's sort of like the timeline in the process. There's questions about decision-making criteria, similar to how there was criteria going into the climate action plan and how different proposals were weighted, thinking about what we should be considering there. And then just some initial questions for feedback from the public. What's working well, what isn't working well that we need to be considering right from the start. So we as a department are looking for feedback on those issues. And in the RFI, there's an email address for folks to reach out to, but I'm also happy to be a resource and can put my email in the chat. Chris?
I'll just note for folk who aren't familiar with rulemaking, I mean, this is actually quite progressive because they're looking for information about how all this is supposed, they're looking for information from the general public about how all this is supposed to work. So this is frankly kind of a response to what this subcommittee has been working on, the Just Transition Subcommittee and the call for just transition. So this RFI is really important to try to get out to people. And it's an opportunity for everybody to comment about how this process should go forward. Just in case, not trying to tell folk what they don't already know, but this is not, frankly, the traditional process. This is an evolution, so it's good.
Thanks, Chris. Sebi, go ahead.
Chris, you took kind of the idea, the concept of what I was going to say. I was just going to say thank you. I think this is commendable that just kind of stepping back before the process starts to get input on the process. So I'm happy to share it with my networks. On the question of kind of like how feedback is incorporated, I haven't been able to kind of see like how that is going to happen. Is the feedback going to be summarized? Is it going to be transparent, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't know if we put that in the document itself, but it is our intention to, once we've received all the input, to summarize it and make that available. We are hoping to have some engagement efforts in the fall, although also wanting to be mindful of other engagement efforts ongoing and not wanting to overburden folks, where we could reflect some of that back in those efforts and then continue to receive information that way. And then the department is required to submit a number of reports each year to the legislature on our renewable energy programs and an annual energy report, and we would expect to include a summary of these efforts in those reports as well. And Sarah, I don't believe there's a link online, although that's an interesting idea. So right now there is an email address where we accept written feedback. But again, I think we're open to, if it's easier for folks to just have a conversation, to email the address or email and the request for information. Or like I said, I'm happy to be a resource, or anyone else at the department can set up conversations if that's an easier way.
Thanks, Claire. I just want to point out, request for information sometimes means something very specific. And so until I read through this, I thought you were putting out, like, trying to draw in information for a scope of work to issue a contract. So I was very confused by that language, when really you're just asking these questions and wanting people to answer it. So I think that's helpful explanation, but I would just encourage you all to stop saying RFI.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Hadn't thought about that.
Thanks for the feedback, and Claire, thanks for sharing a process that I agree does feel pretty progressive. I did note that there wasn't a question asking for suggestions around how to reach underserved communities, but I guess the intent is that this will reach wide variety of audiences and therefore by default catch the non-traditional voices in this input request.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Abby. And yes, we would hope, in particular from like the folks in the subcommittee and hopefully your networks, if you're willing to share, that'd be really helpful feedback. And I think if you have broader feedback than what's in the specific questions themselves, we would be open to really anything at this point. So
Great. There was a suggestion around maybe rebranding it. It's fun to think about. So I want to quickly turn to Chase. Chase, you offered to give an update from the Biomass Task Group, which I think would be great to hear what they're working on, or if there's any requests or needs of this subcommittee.
Yeah, I can keep it pretty brief. The Biomass Task Group that I'm sitting on as a liaison from this subcommittee is considering biomass from wood, which basically is burning wood, to produce electricity. And they're considering, several different questions around that topic. And, one is should there be some sort of an expansion of the burning of wood for the production of electricity and potentially capturing the heat from that same wood. So like you're making electricity, you're capturing the heat, you're using both. There are two sort of bigger facilities in Vermont right now that do that. One's the one in Reigate, and one is right between Burlington's Old North End and Winooski. That's the McNeil facility. And so the update that I wanted to provide to this group was that in recent Biomass Task Group meetings, there was a discussion around the public health impacts of burning wood for the production of electricity and heat. Specifically, when you burn wood, it produces toxic air pollution in the form of fine particulate matter. You might hear people refer to it as PM 2.5. That just means really small fine particulate matter. It gets deep into your lungs and it's associated with lots of ailments, asthma, even cancers. And so there was some discussion around the public health implications, but a question was raised, and I think that this sort of gets to this group's charge of engagement of, have we considered the public health implications enough? Like, have we heard from enough experts? But also, we haven't heard from anybody in the impacted communities. So we hadn't heard from anybody in Burlington's Old North End or Winooski, for example, who are immediately adjacent to the smokestacks from which the fine particulate matter pollution is coming. And so I just wanted to provide an update. I do believe that the task group is interested in hearing from folks from impacted communities, but that hasn't happened yet, to my knowledge. And so I want to provide an update there that I think it's very relevant, very important, and something that to the extent we can, we should try to facilitate to make sure that we hear from folks who live in the impacted communities.
Carrie.
Oh, I had one comment, I guess, for Chase, maybe for awareness for the Biomass Task Group, because you joined this committee a little later, and I think I presented already on our DEC community engagement pilot project, but New Americans in Burlington, Winooski area are one of our target communities, which we're doing outreach to this summer and fall. So we'll get a final report in January, but I'm assuming this issue could come up. I mean, we're having it be community generated to address their concerns in their community, but I know one of the places targeted is one of the low-income housing developments right on Intervale Ave, among other places.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, that development in particular, you can see the smokestacks from that development. And in stick season in winter, when you're on that road, you're looking through that community to the facility. So yeah, that sounds great.
Chase, I was curious, is the task group thinking about how they might want to do some community engagement of impacted communities, or is that just one of your suggestions back to this group as you've thought about the work of the task group?
I don't want to speak out of turn, so this might be something that I guess Jane's not on this call, but Marion perhaps could speak to better than me. I would assume that there's been some discussion, but it might be that this, the Just Transition Subcommittee could provide some help and insight in helping to facilitate those types of conversations.
Yeah, I can provide I haven't been at every task group meeting, so don't have too much to add, but will say I believe at the past couple of meetings, there's always been a request for additional folks to hear from, whether it be stakeholders, interested parties on either side, multiple sides of the issue. So I think if the Just Transition Subcommittee has ideas of communities to engage, I think the task group, as Chase said, would be interested in hearing from those folks. They're very much in and correct me if I'm wrong, Chase, but in sort of a educational and learning and hearing presentations from folks on all sides of the issue. So would be, I believe, interested in hearing from communities.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a couple meetings ago, there was some discussion about, maybe we had reached the end of the need to do fact finding. And I heard was that from multiple members of the task group that it wasn't appropriate to stop fact finding at this point, in part because we haven't heard from impacted community members for other reasons too. But that was a big one, the primary update I wanted to share with this group to the extent we can weigh in.
So Chase, I just want to make sure that you're seeing Kashka's comment, because I know Kashka's not feeling on video today, or maybe even audio, that if you're looking to reach people in the North End, that she can be a point of contact and maybe even a conduit for some of that, since McNeil is very close to her home.
Totally, yeah. Marion, do you want me to loop you into any of those sorts of convos?
I think Jane would be best because she's the one leading up most of that conversation, but I'll let her know.
Great.
Yeah.
Carrie, did you have another hand up? No, okay. Great. Chase, thank you. I'm assuming we'll have future conversations about the work of the Biomass Task Group as well.
Oh, Abby, I do have one other quick thing on the Municipal Vulnerability Index group, of which I'm on, but we haven't met at all. I think there was one meeting, but I just want to share that a RFP went out for a contractor to work on developing the Municipal Vulnerability Index, and the proposals came in, and Jane has shared them with people on the work group to score. And I'm one of the people who's delinquent in the scoring, but thanks to the conversations we had previously about equity in the other RFP that Jane was issuing, when I looked through these, I was really keeping a keen eye on the qualifications of the staff that are going to be performing this work and what type of public engagement and equity lens they're bringing to it. And it is interesting because a lot of the firms are very GIS technical and not as much of the people part. So anyway, I think it's a good idea to have somebody from the Just Transitions on all the RFP evaluation teams moving forward, because I didn't even think about this one until I saw it, and I was like, oh yeah, like we should be having comments on all these, or at least be part of the decision-making process.
Carrie, thank you for sharing that. And one comment that I'll make is that it reminds me that our influence could be to raise awareness around the need to have some of those people skills and those engagement areas of expertise a considered factor, as well as their kind of subject matter expertise. And even if we're not able to be on every task group or review every RFP, I think these last few examples are demonstrating that the awareness and the subject, at least just taking into consideration these additional subjects, is starting to permeate the work of the Climate Council and the various organizations doing the work. So that feels like success and an accomplishment to me that's worth noting and celebrating. Thanks, Anna. That's good. But I also think it would be great. I also appreciate the comment of having as many different opportunities to review RFPs in case they weren't built with that review criteria in mind, looking at the engagement skill set, that you could at least bring that lens to the conversation.
Yeah, I think moving forward, we should design them to be more transparent, that that's something we'll be considering, but I don't think the previous ones were written that way.
So I just want to note on the agenda that we're at the public comment period. So I do want to take public comment, and then I might come back to this work planning discussion, but I also, it's going to be very truncated because I want to be judicious in starting the exercise with Indra at 5:20 as planned. So just want to open it up for public comment. And Pat, I see that your hand's raised. Please go ahead. I think you're still on mute though, Pat.
Okay, we good?
Okay. Yes.
Thanks
for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it, and that this is pretty quick. But going to the outreach that Rachel was talking about, a couple comments. One, the timing of the outreach at the time of year, the fact that people are dealing with significant increases in costs of living, and I'm just wondering how to work that in. I don't have a plan yet. It was just something as I was reading through the handout for today that I thought about that. And two things that might be useful, might have a different sort of feel in terms of the type of activities people would do in that gathering, would be to take a household budget. Maybe even people have people do it in small groups, but to take a budget, income and expenses, you've got this incentive, you have this tax rebate, you have changing gasoline costs, there's all of these pieces. And it is really important that people have a good grasp of what they would be doing if they make this shift in their life. And most people don't do that. And I've seen it in the courts where people get a lease for something and they don't understand the terms of it, and they don't understand something that happened, and all of a sudden they're getting called into court because, you know, they didn't understand the cost. So I've had there's three different incentive payments for just a home, I'm not thinking of the right word, but the new water heaters, and with 3 different places. And it was like, Jesus, you know, I gotta do some work here if I want to do this and get all those rebates. And that was just for a water heater. So anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Pat, thank you. I think between my notes and Carrie's, we can be sure that that gets to Rachel as a suggestion.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else that you wanted to ask or share?
I have some concerns about the language, some of the language that she used, and if you use that in public. But I think I'll just email her directly. She's not on now, right? but okay. I just got to make sure I've got my numbers right. So thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Any other public comments? I don't think I see anyone else. Okay. So very quickly on work planning, and I think this will be a larger discussion for another time, but I just wanted to note that between the last meeting in June and this meeting, Indra, Sebi, Anna, and I did have a work planning conversation. And through that work planning conversation, we had some questions about just needing to maybe take some steps back and think about kind of where the group is at and some of the factors that are influencing this subcommittee. And so I think that's led to Indra running this exercise with us, but it also felt relevant to talk a little bit at some point about some of the changes that have occurred as a result of where we are in the process of the Climate Council and the action plan and the activities of the subcommittees and the emergence of the task groups and just sort of the general capacity of everyone. And so, and that includes, you know, shifts that are happening at the Agency of Natural Resources and with Consensus Building Institute as a consultant able to help the different groups. So I think there's a lot of components that are happening in the background that really are influencing the work that's happening in our subcommittee and others. I'm not sure that we have a lot of time to go in, as much time as I had hoped to go into those items. And Marion, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wondered, is there anything from A&R about standing up the Climate Action Office that you want to reference now? Or do we want to just hold this whole subject for a later time when we have more room on the agenda?
Sorry, not prepared for that question.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it sounds like the conversation that Indra and Sebi are going to lead may help frame that whole conversation up for a later date. So perhaps holding it would be helpful.
Okay. Great. Well, Sebi and Indra, I'm happy to turn it over to you for the reflection exercise.
Awesome. I will get us started. But in the beginning, I just want to acknowledge that I was late in sending this game plan to Abby. So she was late, not because of her delayed mind, and I take responsibility for that. I just want to acknowledge that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think we have a lot of work to do, and doing exercise like this might feel like, you know, we are backtracking, delaying the work. I acknowledge that. Yet, you know, in the discussion that I've had, it felt like maybe it would be important for us to kind of like take a step back and really take a look at it, you know, about like why we joined, what were the challenges that we faced, and what are the things that we want to do, with the hope that, you know, it will help us shape the future agenda and the way we want to move forward. And I think, you know, it will come true. So first thing, there is no goal, and y'all might wonder why the hell are we doing this exercise even? Sometimes doing the work without any goal in mind and really having an honest and open conversation opens up a lot of things that are not really dealt with in a procedural setting where we have goal, we have agenda, we're rushing to meet it, and we have seen it manifest in some of our meeting. So when I said there is no goal and agenda, I just want to, you know, be honest about it. And the second thing is, even if I had a goal, I think that would influence the response that we would be providing. For example, if I had said the goal is to really think about our future action, the responses that we would be including here would be focused on that. So there is no goal. It's more of to really have an honest conversation among ourselves and do the work. Second, I just said honest conversation, and I want to acknowledge that it is a recorded conversation that public can access. And oftentimes, honesty and that thing, they are not compatible. And for those folks who are outside and are wondering, how does the transparency in the government work? I want to acknowledge that, just because we cannot say everything out in public does not mean we are not transparent about the public process. It simply means we are not able to really go through, the inner feelings that we have as human rather than only the people who are in the subcommittee. And the final thing is, as we are talking about all of those things, and as you're writing, responses, please emphasize on the clarity aspect, because I will be the first to acknowledge that, sometimes we use jargon. For example, equity, I do a lot of consulting work, equity, just and whatnot. And oftentimes there is no common understanding. And even though we have the just transition principle, we might be lacking a common definition among ourselves. So as you're drafting your responses, please be clear and, be specific. And the game plan here is for the first 15 minutes, I think there will be a lot of silence. And oftentimes silence is really hard to deal with. I acknowledge that because I'm somebody who talks a lot. And when there is a silence in the room, it becomes really difficult. But sometimes silence is productive. During that time, what we will do is I will just prompt us with the Jamboard, and I'm going to read a couple prompts. I'm going to reference a couple of the things, and I would ask you to just jot those things down. After that, for about 10 minutes, I will lead us into this exercise of I noticed, rather than really sharing what I said. What do you see in the Jamboard? What do you notice? And noticing and analyzing are different things. Noticing is, there is a plain simple language that's posted there. And at the end, I think I'm going to go through this exercise called I see you. And when doing that exercise, I'm going to reference back to that again. If you see a particular comment reference there, even if you really agree, I see you, the person who wrote this, because, and your reasoning, even if you vehemently disagree, like we are a public entity, do not be afraid to say, I disagree with this. I see you that you wrote that, but I disagree with you. And at the end, we all will have, I think, a collective sense of data that we can work together and may facilitate our discussion around task planning in the future. So yeah, Abby, thank you so much for sending that bit.ly. So if we could open that, and I'm going to share my screen where I have about 45 different tabs. The first thing is, what inspired you to join the Just Transition Subcommittee? And for those of you who haven't used this before, in order to type your comment, there is this text box. You can just select on it and you can just start typing. If you want to not use your logged in, email, that's totally fine. Before we start writing, a couple of things that I want to address. Inspirations are really great. They drive us in order to do the work. They bring the energy into the work that we do. Yet sometimes they're a hindrance, because when we come with certain inspirations, especially doing the public work, we are hesitant to really engage with the opinions that may not align with ours. Inspirations are the driving force that let us do the work in an effective way, yet they are the loyalty that we carry. They're the agenda that we want to bring forth to the discussion. Knowing that, what inspired you to join the Just Transition Subcommittee? And if there is any need for clarification, happy to. But let's, let's not comment on the things that are written here. There should be only 3. People probably clicked on the next, which creates a new slide. So I would ask us to go to slide number 1 that says inspiration to join the Just Transition Subcommittee. And to the person who used that sticky note, thank you. We can also use the sticky note. I forgot about it. And it is right here. And to the folks who were confused and drawing here, I think you're using the pen and the eraser tool. That's probably doing that. So instead, use the sticky note or the text. Yes, I forgot to address what Sebi said. If you're unable to really participate in this one, please directly message Sebi just so that we can put that up here, or I or Anna.
So can I put it in the chat because I am not able?
Yes. I forgot to address that.
And the people, I think they are laughing at me now.
No, you can send it on a chat. I forgot to address that. That's
Thank you.
And for those who are not able to see the screen because you are on your phone, I will be reading them out loud. And I'll give us about a minute. Again, we have time constraints, so I'm trying to, but please feel free to like go back and share through chats as well. I acknowledge that there must be more that we want to share. But for the sake of time, I do want to move to slide number 2 that talks about the challenges that we experienced. And in terms of challenge, a couple of things that I do want to share. Challenges that we experienced may stem from our own inspiration that acts as a loyalty at times. 2, about the process, the way which we are doing the work. And 3, the lack of clarity in the work that we are doing as well. However, challenges are challenges that often disable us from doing the work that we want to do. During your time as the subcommittee member, what are some of the challenges that you have experienced in terms of doing the work that you hope you would be doing? As before, if you like to share your comments through chat, Sebi mentioned that you can always send it to him. If we could complete this in the next 1 minute, that would be great. Before I move into the next slide, where we will be writing down some of the comments as well, there are two things that I want to do. One is I just want to reference back, and I hope I haven't gotten this wrong. I got this directly from the act that was passed about the role of Just Transition Subcommittee as it was specified in the law. And if I'm getting this wrong, please do let me know. I got it from the official source. I'll just read it out loud. This subcommittee shall focus on ensuring that the strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emission and to build resilience to adapt the effect of climate change benefit and support all residents of the state fairly and equitably. This subcommittee shall ensure that strategies consider the disproportionate impact of climate change on rural, low-income, and marginalized community, and that the program and incentive for building resilience are designed to be accessible to all Vermonters and do not unfairly burden any groups, communities, geographic locations, or economic sectors. This subcommittee may adopt a measurement tool to assess the acceptability of the program and strategies considered by the council. As written in the law. And before we go into the next slide, Sebi, do you mind just reading out loud what's written on the first and the second one, please?
Sure. I hope that I'm not lagging too much. I see myself skipping. Thumbs up. Are we good? Okay. So I'm happy to read through word for word everything, but I also tried to group, at least in the first slide, what I was seeing were a couple patterns of themes. So if you look on the first slide on the left side, it is generally sort of procedural and justice and having voices at the table. And I think sort of more to the right is the impact of our climate action on, people's pocketbooks or their ability to really benefit from a just transition. So I'll go through them quickly. Ensuring voices of people not at the table are heard. The idea that we might actually be listened to, knowing that a lot of people are left behind and not included when the government makes decisions on their behalf. Working together to help Vermont policymakers incorporate the voices and perspectives of historically marginalized people into the policymaking process such that those perspectives inform outcomes. Ensure that our actions to reduce climate pollution are progressive, not regressive. Bring forward the voices of working class Vermonters to make a difference. To become part of a community to envision and learn how government might do things differently, moving forward to better support all people, to be part of a process that changes how government engages on policy development and public engagement. I hope to expand the traditional way of making policy and implementing programs to become more inclusive and less elitist. I'm particularly concerned about economic and racial equity. So that another one, so that we are not leaving anyone behind in our climate transition. Be a part of powerful decision-making spaces, quote unquote powerful. I want to make a difference. I'm a bit of an idealist and always strive to make things better. To learn how to think differently and act more justly and responsibly as a public servant and citizen of this wonderful state. Another, I was asked to serve presumably because of advocacy on fairness, equity, and justice matters as they relate to planning and governance. And moving to the right, helping to make complicated new policy ideas understandable and accessible so that folks can then contribute to the formation of those new policies. Because climate action is a huge opportunity to change society for the better. Another, I want government to do better, to spend money where it matters for marginalized people, to make decisions that work for marginalized people, to make sure people are included and not forgotten, to make sure that climate action is not just something that benefits the haves and leaves the rest behind, to ensure that our actions to reduce climate pollution are, I already said that one, progressive, not regressive. Another, I care about the planet, but I really care about the people who live on it and want to make sure everyone has the ability to thrive. And the last, being a young person. All right, next page.
Challenges.
The challenges that we have experienced serving on this. All right, the committee seems under-resourced for the things we are supposed to be doing. Lack of clarity in my role as a subcommittee member or of the subcommittee as a whole. The learning curve of government meetings, understanding my role, being mindful of my privilege, at times I fail. Lack of shared understanding of our purpose as a group. It feels like we could and want to work on everything, but have so little capacity. The work is slow and hard, not feeling a holistic shared work goal / direction, but finding traction only here or there. Lack of a shared understanding of Just Transition's work within the Just Transition, by ANR, by the Climate Council. Lack of time, lack of resources, lack of cohesiveness, and the ability to onboard individuals who are not doing this for a living. Migrating Just Transition's principles and practices to local government. I'm proud of how much progress we've made, but I know there is so much further to go, and it's hard to live in that space, especially when a lot of our feedback from the public is that we haven't done enough. Addressing and overcoming my ignorance as to my own privilege and biases, the systemic injustice within existing modes of engagement, and therefore inability to listen, learn, and change. Limited capacity to engage as fully as I would like to. Lack of expertise as a climate advocate and not always being familiar with what the subcommittee is discussing. Communicating information to my network and expecting a response. Balancing the urgency of our work with the pace necessary to do our work well. Process is slow and change takes longer than I am comfortable with. Clarity around what we want to see happen versus what we want / can be responsible for. Lack of clarity around how the Just Transition Subcommittee fits into the work of the council, since we didn't submit recommendations, but we were more focused on process / outreach / engagement strategies. And lastly, any government work is so technical and it's hard for bureaucrats, even well-meaning, to speak in plain language.
And all of this are the voices of people that we collectively work with.
Hold on, sorry, I did miss one, sorry, Indra. Sorry to cut you off. In a state that deems itself to be progressive, it can be difficult for those in positions of privilege to acknowledge reality. Thanks.
Thank you, Sebi. So I just want to acknowledge that these are all the voices of the people that we collectively serve with. And we probably haven't heard all of them. And quite honestly, to really go through them and dig deeper into them, one small meeting is not going to be enough. Yet I hope it paints a broader picture in terms of understanding that we are sharing similar aspirations and also similar challenges. Some of us might be worried about not addressing the voices of the marginalized community, but there are allies in the room who are, willfully aware of the privileges that bring in, and the bridge that needs to be created. It might be the work that we need to do, and it might be the challenge that we are facing. Having said that, and I'm gonna again reference back this role of Just Transition Subcommittee as it was written. I want to go to the next one, and that is, what are some of the aspirations and expectations? What are some of the things that you hope we could collectively do, you could bring to the table, you could collaborate with others? And I know I want to acknowledge that some of the exercises have been done in the past, and we have thrown a lot of ideas. It could be the same idea that you bring to the table. if it has changed at all after reading the aspiration that people bring to the table, the shared challenges that we have, is there anything that you would like to share in terms of the work that you as an individual would like to do, us collectively as Just Transition Subcommittee would like to do, or something that we want to make it happen? So same process as before.
And before I start writing, I want to acknowledge that I missed a couple direct messages on the 2 prior prompts while I was reading them out. The first one is on inspirations to join, and it was, I love to be involved in an active member of the community. And the second was, the challenge is no one listens from the first time, and it is trying to keep repeating yourself.
Thank you.
So Indra, will you repeat this slide? So this is what we would want to do, or what we have like vision for
If
the
it were,
subcommittee?
yes, even if you're taking any of the work at a personal level, because we come here with the aspiration, it could be the work of the subcommittee, collectively, or it could be a project that you want to carry on where you need the resources in order to get it done, or you hope that subcommittee as a whole would do this work, or would ask the government to do a particular work. What do you aspire? What do you expect us to do collectively, but also thinking about the capacity that you can bring? Is that clear?
Yes, somehow I just needed you to repeat it for me. Thank you.
Again, this conversation could last forever. I acknowledge the limitation of time. We operate in that way, and that's one of the challenges, that we experience. So if we could conclude, I think we can open up for an open conversation. Does anybody need more time? And I can't really see. If you need more time, could you raise your hand? All right. In an ideal world, we would have spent some more time really talking about it. But given the time constraint, I'm going to kind of slightly change the way I was thinking of having this conversation. Again, I acknowledge that this is not, in order to have a real and honest conversation, we would need more time. And this kind of exercises I've done in, different settings where we spent 2 days, 3 days trying to figure this out. Given that time constraint, I want us to start with, whoever wants. I don't expect us to raise the hand because that is kind of a process that we have to go through. If we are speaking, at the same time, that's okay. We know we can make space for others. So rather than raising the hand, let's just unmute and shape the conversation this way. I noticed, and by notice, oftentimes people tend to bring in their own judgment. Here in this one, let's try not to. I'll try my best. I noticed that among several members of this subcommittee, there is a confusion about the role of the subcommittee and our unified objective. And I can go back to the things that were said, to reference that. I'm not adding my judgment. And I see you, to the people that you want to respond, any of the comments that you see there where you feel like you might be able to collaborate, you share the same emotions. If I'm not being clear, please let me know, but let's just start talking. And there is no structure to this. If there is a need for a follow-up, please ask the person, feel free to. But again, just know that people will be willing to share only insofar as they're comfortable sharing. So for the remaining of the time that's allotted to me, let's just have a conversation. Let's not follow the formality of raising the hand and whatnot. We'll make it work. We only have 11 minutes, so let's just go.
I'm just reading everyone else's aspirations and expectations still now.
Well, I can start because I was asked privately to read out one of the aspirations, and so it ties into something I noticed. The aspiration is, this is full-time work. I wish there were more resources available so that we could expand our reach and be able to commit the time to reaching our goals. And what I notice is a lot of people share a lot of goals, and we, with the ambiguity of those goals and the spread of them, and combined with our lack of capacity, it creates some serious frustration and challenges for us as a group.
Sevi, I have a follow-up question for you. Where did you notice that people felt like it was a full-time job?
Well, I think I noticed that was verbatim what one of the comments said, but it's also true that some of us, including myself, do this type of work. Maybe I'm not paid necessarily to be on this committee, but for a living, and there are some of us who don't do that. And so this is really kind of outside volunteering for those types of people. And so we have a mix, and it creates some substantial challenges, I think.
The reason why I probed you is one, because you and I, we're engaged in the planning, so it's easier for me to pick on you, but also to serve as an example, because if it was verbatim, that's great. But I think implying that it's a lot of work may not simply mean we have to be engaged. If we are a public entity body and there is an aspiration to get something done, is there a way to define our role to be an advocate and really demanding the government that it does certain thing? If there is a clarity among us, we might be able to ask for that rather than us being full-time, right? But if it was verbatim, then yeah. But no raising hand, Chris, just go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, this has been, I'm a council member, but I actually didn't ask to be a member of the council. Like I appointed. And part of my frustration from the outset for all of this is the legislature asked the council in basically a year and a couple of months to basically develop a plan to completely transform our relationship to energy and the land, and then create a subcommittee to deal with how do we do that in a just way. And we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to take basically, millennia of existence and figure this out in a year and a couple of months. And no wonder people are pissed off and frustrated and angry and we did it during a pandemic. We couldn't meet with each other face to face. We couldn't go to where they are. We're doing it through, Zoom has been great. It increases participation, but hell, I can't read body language. I don't know how people are feeling. Again, we evolved over millennia to talk to each other, to meet with people, not act like the Hollywood squares. So anyway, I think that frustration, just from my standpoint, is throughout this whole process. And I'm not faulting anybody. What I would fault is I've been working on this since '91. I've been working on this for decades. And we're still deliberating whether or not it's a thing that needs to be addressed, whether we need to make an energy transition. And everything that was said has come true. The planet is on fire or it's flooding. We warned ourselves that it's going to be more and more expensive and harder the longer we wait. So I get the urgency, but there's got to be a better way than this. Sorry, I said too much.
No, I appreciate that. And I think, all of these comments and all of this frustration ought to come out. And, I don't know if we'll be able to. So for the future participants who are going to talk, I also want to go back to, I noticed something that you strictly noticed there. And I see you directly responding to something that you see on the slides. Not saying that's the only thing that are out there, not being in person, the lack of, trust, all of those are real things. But I think, we can build off of this conversation. So.
I noticed that more than one comment mentioned resources and needing to be given more of them, be given adequate resources to do good work. And I feel that's expressed in multiple ways. And I wonder if we can't find those resources. So I see the people who are hurting for money or time or whatever resource we might need to get more engagement.
I note, Indra, sorry. Oh, I was gonna say, and I don't know if I'm doing your activity right, but I noticed that some people are expressing a focus on process and how the work gets done, and some people are focusing on doing the work. And that's a distinction that I'm noticing. Yeah, that's all I have.
I noticed that it seems like there is more work to be done to really make sure everyone feels comfortable speaking and that their voices can be heard and that they know what's going on in a public meeting, in the government context and all of that, really helping people feel welcome and safe to speak up and share their voices. Even saying, yes, please speak up doesn't go far enough. And that was something that I noticed in some of the comments and something I also recognize and I felt that too. So I wanted to lift that up.
Anyone who hasn't noticed or seen want to weigh in? I don't want to take up the last 3 minutes.
I don't know how to characterize this, but to my mind, there's a different, there's a need, and not just in this work, but just in work of government, period, to not only hear from people who are in marginalized communities, frontline communities, whatever we want to, whatever term we want to use, not just to hear from them, but actually empower them to come to the table with solutions. And I don't mean to make it us, them, that's not what I'm talking about, but too often, we bring the information, as I'm talking, we meaning governments, bring information to people and explain to them why this should be the policy. Because oftentimes, right, we've already received the directive from a legislature or governor or some executive or legislative body. Therefore, we are tasked with going out and almost kind of proselytizing about what should be. But we really need to empower communities to bring their solutions. So not just to hear what's not working, but what will work best for them. And I think that's a hard, that's something that really requires dedicated resources, because it means you're following through on not just the public engagement side, which frankly is the easy part. It's the actual translating of that public engagement to real policy that actually achieves the just transition ends.
It's 5:59. So first, this is likely one of the first government or public meeting with a lot of silences in it. So I feel like we accomplished something. It's always good to live in silence. The second thing is there is not a lot of things that we wanted to achieve. There was no goal. But I hope that, one thing that we can take away with is in this room, I see and I notice that we have shared aspirations. None of the person here said that I'm here just to do, evil shit. We are here to do good for the people. And I also see a common shared challenge that is, we really don't know what we stand for. We don't know what our common, work is. Yet we have a lot of aspiration as to we want to do this. With a lot of challenges, including being virtual. Second, not having interpersonal challenge. Interpersonal connection, it becomes really difficult to do the work. So I hope from a procedural sense, as a facilitator, it's not only to have this exercise, but I'm going to send us the copy of what we have written down, so that I think this will come in handy as we're thinking about the things that we want to do in the future. Second thing is, I really invite us to reach out to one another. I know that I'm not afraid of saying S word and some of the curse word here and there, because I really, that's how I operate. And if anybody has a problem, they got a problem. But many of us, we cannot have that honest conversation. But within this room, there are people who are really inclined to have that conversation. So if there is anything that we can do, even if we cannot achieve anything publicly and policy-wise, do reach out to one another. My email is open, happy to have a conversation. And I hope we'll be able to use this in terms of thinking about the things that we want to do in the future. And I invite all of us to really take a look at the task that was assigned by the law, because I think it is very specific. And in some cases, it may provide us some clarity. I'm not a lawyer, but even for, a simple mind, that was kind of clear. So thank you for entertaining, this worked, and I hope we can do something with it in the future. I don't know what exactly, but I'll send it to all of us. Let's reflect, and I'm sure we can make use of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Indra. Thank you, Sabi and Anna, for being part of the development process, and thanks for everyone's participation. Have a great rest of your evening, either pre or post storm. It's going to get cooler out there. Nice to see everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.